So I'm going to be recording this in a couple of different parts. This first part is going to be to show you the fractional decimal conversion chart, which I have attached as an attachment here. It's a JPEG for your convenience. The significant thing about this is it's divided into various types of measurement. The first one, of course, is the fractional measurements, the things that you would find associated with a common English ruler and or your circle templates. Now, I apologize for the fact that the English decided to divide things into odd things, or if you want to say that, stupid things like eighths, sixteenths, and 30 seconds. It's not a very rational system, I'll agree, but it's the one that we're kind of stuck with, and our circle templates will reflect that, unless, of course, you have a decimal circle template, and that would be the measurements which are located here. Decimal being somewhat more rational than the fractional one because it divides things into more precise measurements, like here I'll give you the and before I move on, the most rational system of all is the European one, which is metric. That's a discussion for another whole day, so we won't go into that right now. Anyway, the first measurement that we're going to be looking at, of course, is the quarter inch, which in decimal terms is 0.25 or 0.250. And that would correspond to the measurement on your circle template, which measures a quarter inch right there, 0.25. The next one up, or the next one down rather, would be the one is 3/16, 0.1875, and that would jibe with this measurement on your circle template. After that is the 1/8 inch, which is half of the quarter, so that's 0.125 on your decimal. And the reason I'm giving you decimals is we'll get to that here in just a moment. Beyond that, a little bit further down is 1/8, and that's where it shows up on your circle template. And then we have 1/16, that's 0.0625. And that shows up on your circle template right there. Now, the reason why I'm showing you all of these is because of the fact that you've probably used these in order to lay out your rough version of the sketch. In my case, that looks like this. And then going forward, we're going to be dealing with Ashley's portrait, which is the one that I showed you the other day. And that looks like that. So I'm going to stop this here for a moment, and then we will move into Illustrator, and I will show you how to lay all of that out. So the first part of this is largely dedicated to layout. I'm going to bring that in just a little bit so that I can see the bottom of my artboard. I created an artboard in Illustrator, which is 8 inches by 8 inches, which was the size of the portrait that I asked you to save in Photoshop. So well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to name this layer here background, and you want to save a background white layer that's just dedicated to being a background for a bit further into the process here. So I'm going to save that as a background, and I'm going to lock it up so I can't do anything with it, and I'm going to create another layer above that. And this one's going to be where I'm going to place the portrait. You'd be placing your portrait here, your image. And given that you probably did some manipulation of it in Photoshop, or you should have anyway, it probably is pretty high contrast and it ought to be black and white. So I'm going to be bringing Ashley's in here. So I'm going to go to File and Place. And I'm going to be bringing in this one, which I saved specifically for this, called Portrait in Illustrator. When it comes in, it's going to kind of move around a little bit. And it's going to open up fairly large. And it's got a white background or a white position background around it. That's okay. You can see where your artboard edges are. and it should line up with that pretty well. So there we have it. It's pretty high contrast, and I think we're ready to proceed. So I'm going to lock that up because I don't want to work on that layer again. I want to work on the next layer above that. And this is where I'm going to put my overlay. This would be the thing that would correspond to the tracing paper. And so for doing that one, I'm going to make sure that I change my fill to white. And for those of you who are familiar with hexadecimal, that's 6Fs. And I'm going to use my shape tool, and I'm going to put a rectangle directly around the image here. Make it a little bit longer. Bring that up. So that pretty well covers up Ashley's portrait, which is fine. What we want to do now, though, is we want to go into overlay. We want to go to properties, and we want to go to where it says opacity. We want to turn that opacity down to about maybe 50%, somewhere around in there, 50, 51%. You can type in precise measurements if you want to. That's fine. So now we have the overlay positioned over the top of it. And this is going to make it easier for us to proceed with the work that we need to do going forward. All right, so I'm going to go back to my layers, and I'm going to lock up the overlay. And now I'm going to establish my grid. Now, establishing a grid in Illustrator is a little bit different than it is in Photoshop. And I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to call that grid. But the nice thing about establishing a grid in Illustrator is that you can make it any color that you want to. I'm going to make mine blue. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my fill, and I'm going to establish a new line color. You want a new stroke color for this. And the other nice thing about the grid thing in Illustrator is you can make the line width anything that you want. I'm going to make mine that color blue. And now I'm going to use my shape tool, and I'm going to draw a line right around the outside of the portrait. And you might not be able to see this just yet, but there is a blue line all the way around the outside of the portrait itself now. Now, in order to divide this up into a rational grid, and mine may already be set to what I had it set up before, but what you want to do is you want to go to Object, Path, and then under Object Path, you want to go, where is it? Split into grid. Good, it didn't save it, so I can show you. Here I currently have only one in rows, and we know that this image is 8 by 8 inches, so that means we want to divide it into 1/4 inch increments. So we want, not 24, we want 32 by 32. And when we say OK, it'll add the grid lines. So there, now we have the grid lines established over the top, and we should lock that layer up as well. So now we're all set to begin applying our point sizes. So I'm going to pause here again for a second, and then we will proceed. Now the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to establish some point sizes, and you're going to want to make sure that your points are separated in layers, or different layers, so that you can work independent of one another. So I'm going to create a new layer. All of my layers are currently locked. I'm going to name this one the 0.25 point. This is going to correspond, of course, to my 1/4 inch, or the largest of the points in the document, or in the file rather. So what I want to do now is I want to get rid of my stroke, and I want to change my fill color to black, which is already set for me right here. That's fine. It's 6 zeros, and say OK. And now what I want to do, it didn't change it. Sorry about that. It's changed it back to white, 6 zeros. There we go. You'll notice that my fill color has changed here. And now what I want to do is I want to create a circle. I'm going to use my ellipse tool. If I click anywhere on the screen and just once click, this dialog box is going to come up. Now mine's already set to what I had done before, which is 0.25. You may come up with a different increment here. This is fine. This is the 1/4 inch point. So now when I say OK, I get a perfect 1/4 inch point, which is what I want to have. And I'm going to move that one down here and just hold it in place. And I'm going to lock that up. All right, so now the next one up that I would want would be the, hold on just a sec. The next one up, of course, would be the one that jibes with my 3/16 or 0.1875. So we're going to, again, using a black fill, and we're going to create another layer. And this one is going to be our 0.1875 point, just to be consistent here. And we're going to use our black fill and our shape again. I want the circle. I'm going to click once in the center, and now of course we're going to change that from 0.25 to 1.875, and again 1.875, and OK. And we've gotten a 3/16 or 0.1875 dot, which is 25% smaller than the first one. So now we're going to hold that one until we're ready to use it. We're going to open up our next one, which is our 1/8 inch dot, or 1/8 inch point. The 1/8 inch point is going to be a 0.125 point. So I'm putting that on a layer of its own. The other layers are still locked. My fill is still set to black. I'm using my circle template. Click once inside at the image area and use 0.125 and 0.125. Okay, and then that corresponds to the 1/8 inch point, which is 50% smaller than this one. And now we're going to make our last one. We're going to lock this up, and we'll be making our last one next. Our last one is the 1/16 inch, and that measurement would be 0.0625 point, so that we make sure that everything is the same all the way down. We're out of spell here. And using our black and the fill again, click on that, click in the middle, and change this to 0.625. 0.625. And OK. Okay, so now we have all of our points established. I think I can just use my arrow key here to move that down. The bounding boxes around that little shape have completely obscured it. You can hardly see it at this scale. And move that into position over here. So this is the smallest of the points. Now again, you guys can use anything that you want to. Okay, this is the full-size one. This is the one that's 75% smaller, 50% smaller, and 25% smaller. Now we're going to go about establishing them into the layout itself. So the next thing to do, of course, is to kind of zoom in here on this area of the portrait, and lock everything up except the 0.25 point that you want to use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an edit copy and edit paste in place, because that's the process that I'm going to be using to do all of these with. So the first one up will go right there in the grid, because these are the ones that fill in the darkest of the squares. So again, do edit, copy, and edit, paste in place. Now there are keyboard shortcuts for that. I'm not going to use those right now for the sake of this instruction. So you can just continue to do that. Now, once you've got two of them, it gets a little easier to do. You go around both of them and do edit, copy, and edit, paste in place, and then move those two up. And you can continue to proceed that way until you've got quite a line of these. Okay, edit, copy, and edit, paste in place, and we'll move it up. Now I'm going to pause this here for a minute until I get up to having all of them done on this side of the portrait. All right, I haven't been terribly careful about where these are positioned relative to the grid line, and you might want to be a little bit more careful about the placement when you're doing yours. But my point here was to try to show you how quickly you can do this. Now I've got a full line of the 1/4 inch points lined up along one side of the document here, which corresponds to the darkest sections of the grid. So if I wanted to begin to fill this in really quickly, all I need to do is go around that entire stack and do edit and copy, edit, paste in place, and then just move them over. And I can continue to do that. I'm going to do edit, copy, edit, paste in place again, and move them over. So you can see how quickly you can get this done, because what you're doing actually is just duplicating what you did in the last whole grid layer and moving it over. So it makes it doing like squares really, really easy to do. And it'll hopefully make things a little bit more precise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go next to discussing how you would determine something like, say, for instance, this square right here. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter than any of the darker squares around it. So I might elect to put the 0.1875 point in that one. In this one here, this is a little bit lighter still. And in that case, I might want to put in the 0.125 or the 1/8 inch square in that area. Where it gets into the squares that are like completely white here, I might elect to not put anything into it at all. In ones where you've got, like this one, here's a really good example. I'm going to zoom in on that real quick here. You can see that particular grid right there, that one right there, is like 50-50. There's half white and half dark. It's going to depend on what you determine will be the best thing to go in there, but I might put in like the smallest of the point sizes, the 0.0625. But what you got to do is you got to experiment with it a little bit to see how it looks. And we'll take a look at that here. I will try to go ahead and finish this up, and then we will take and turn off the portrait underneath so that all that you're seeing is the background layer behind, and we'll see what it looks like. So back in a little bit. So here I have pretty much concluded most of the points that occupy the dark spaces in the grid, with a few exceptions. What I held off on was I wanted to show you how much that paste in place and moving things with your keys are your friend in these instances. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to darken in some spots right here, because there's a couple of squares which are purely black. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab this one and this one. Oop, hold shift and do edit, copy, and edit, paste in place. And now I'm just using my arrow keys to move them over. Now you'll notice that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take what are the bounding boxes around the points and line them up with the grid points themselves. This one right here and this one right here might constitute full squares or full points. I might I might do that. Let's see, edit, copy again, and edit, paste in place. And I'm going to move those down to here and then over. Oop, too far. There we go. This one, of course, has a little bit of white in it, so that one's not going to. This one here, maybe. So let's see. I can always change my mind about this. Edit and copy and edit and paste in place. I'm going to move that one over. Again, trying to make sure that the bounding box around the point stays lined up with the grid. I think I went a little bit too far. Oh, maybe I didn't. Okay. These have a little bit of white on the sides, and I want to begin to make some changes there. I don't see any other points necessarily in the mix here that constitute full dark squares. Maybe this one up here, but there's a little bit of her hair showing through that, so I'm going to leave that alone. These up here, maybe this one. Edit, copy, edit, paste in place. And so I'm going to move that one down. There we go. Oop. Did I go down too far? I did. All right, so now I'm going to back up on the whole thing here and take a look, see what we got. Again, it's going to be rather difficult to figure out, and I also wanted to say, it was really easy to move these. Once I had this edge along here, I'll light that up so that you can see what I'm talking about. Once I had all of those in position, all I did was just, copy, cut, and paste, and just kept moving them across until I got into areas like this where I would eliminate a couple and then move them across. It made it so much quicker and easy to do. All right, I'll be back in a few when I have some more to show you. All for right at the moment. So here I have completed the rest of the placements for the remainder of the points. As you can see, the image is still kind of quick course. I'm going to back up on it here a little bit so you can see it. And I'm going to turn off the black and white background so that we can see what it looks like without the image behind it. I'll back it up a little bit more, and I'm going to turn off the grid. So this is the nice thing about it is that you can take the grid out of the mix, which you can't do if you do it in Photoshop. So you can kind of see it, and the further away from the image that you get, the more you can see what the overall image looked like. So this is what I want you to do with yours. Of course, the sketch helps you get there because you've kind of already decided for yourself where you're going to place the various points. I might do another one of these with a much finer grid work behind it. See, the further you get away, the more believable it is. I might do another one of these which will be more fine a point than this one is. So there you have it, and I will see you guys in the next video.